So a couple of my friends have asked me how I'm still playing Palworld without getting burned out, and it's really gotten me thinking about why a month after release, it still feels like the first day I ever booted the game up. And there's no right way to play any game, so if you enjoy your own playstyle, I hope this video doesn't pressure you out of that enjoyment. But if you like Palworld and are finding it hard to keep playing, or feel yourself burning out from micromanaging armor durability, owl balls, AI bugs, or whatever, I want to help you get a better grip on your playthrough and fight the never-ending itch to do 1,000 things at once, and yet never feel satisfied or even complete the game. Early access aside, the reason it's easy to burn out is because there are so many systems that pull you in many directions. So the aspect of chores and micromanaging start to become tiresome without a lack of direction towards overarching goals. So I've designed a flowchart for staying focused and maintaining that sense of enjoyment playing Palworld that I've naturally started to lean into, and has helped me continue playing for 160 plus hours without any real sense of burnout. First, I like to look at Palworld like an MMORPG. At level 1, you spawn in a pre-made world near low-level enemies, and your goal is to progress to endgame. You're even given quests to start the game off. And the endgame isn't completely fleshed out by the developers yet, but progress to become that level 50 OP endgamer we all know so well in MMORPGs is essentially my final destination, right? You know how you will play an MMO and you'll start in that opening town, and there'll be some guy wearing this godly looking armor or this gear with these weapons you can't comprehend how he got, and you're just wondering, what do you need to do to get to that point, or to at least experience what it is that you're such in awe of? That's kind of how I look at Palworld holistically. When I open the technology menu, I'm looking at all of the items from level 1 to 50 as me becoming that end gamer god, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to that point, or at least that was my mentality at first. The way I see it, because PvP isn't out yet, right? The closest concept I can use as a focal point are the boss towers, and at this moment I'm only level 43 on a default hard setting single player server. I've beaten the first 2 towers, and the power creep of the final 3 is so steep I realized I had to start optimizing my playthrough. So in order to overcome the steep EXP curve and progress walls, the game is essentially asking us to nurture teams and builds to best prepare for in-game or the eventual PvP scene. I mean, this is a simple concept in Pokemon, right? Because you're always progressing your team, and you're going through these towns and you're fighting these different gyms, and at the end you're going to fight the Elite Four and become the champion. So your timeline is laid out for you. You know exactly where you're headed. And in Palworld isn't always clear because it's an open world game that's in early access. But because of how Palworld is laid out, with similarities to Pokemon and this team building aspect, with also having an EXP bar or an EXP level and a steep EXP curve that picks up when you get into the later 30s or early 40s, and there's these progress walls when it comes to gear, technology, and gyms. It really does feel just like an MMORPG, and it's really akin to that long-term loop, which plays a big role in why I can continue to play, because to me it's like I'm playing a new MMO and I just haven't reached endgame yet. So getting more into some specifics of mentality or approach. As a prerequisite, I think it's important you determine what kind of world experience you want. So this is going to be the most important decision because it will determine the theme of the playthrough. Just like games like Minecraft, you make your own world or play on a server, you get to decide if you're going to play a very casual survival game or if you're looking for a more hardcore, challenging, and long-term time commitment of an experience, right? Whether that's with the default Minecraft game or modded playthroughs. Because at its root, Palworld is a survival game, but it's mixing so many elements similar to a modded Minecraft experience that it just becomes so hard to maintain focus and keep your eye on the prize of what is exactly at the end game, which to me is just like an MMORPG. So when it comes to choosing a difficulty that fits your desired playstyle, we have casual. If you do not have a lot of free time and you want to progress quickly, low pressure, low stakes, go for the casual experience. If you want to play the game as intended, might as well go with normal. At least that way you don't have to question whether or not this is what the developers wanted the game to feel like. But for me and for others like me, I highly suggest playing in hard mode, because if you like to stretch out the playthrough as long as possible with the greatest sense of reward, challenge, and maximum utilization of the game's systems, I think hard mode really pushes that. I've only spent about 8 to 10 hours or so playing a multiplayer server that was on the hard settings, and since I stopped playing on that server, I've only played on a single player hard mode server, so my perspective of the game is fairly limited to the hard mode experience. Oh, and if you don't like any of those 3 presets, then you can just customize and choose your own settings. That way it's completely catered to you and you beat it at your own pace. But getting into the flowchart, first I think it's really important to explore the map and mark points of interest. I don't know if this is considered natural or if it's just a gamer thing, but when I get into an open world, especially one where I can't see the entire map, I naturally just want to see what all it has to offer. I'm thinking Elden Ring, I'm thinking Breath of the Wild, Genshin Impact, whatever game has a large open world full of mysteries to uncover and things to explore. Spending a lot of time literally just running around the map, taking the world in, becoming more immersed, increasing my knowledge of the world and its different worldly systems, whether that's the temperature, the different biomes and their vast resources, the spawn points of interesting materials or chests for Palworld's sake, and just really submitting oneself to the world and seeing what it all has to offer. I know in a lot of survival games, the world isn't predetermined or set, especially when I think about Minecraft. The procedurally generated worlds have an appeal, but since Palworld's map is completely set, that alone is its own aspect of completion and sense of progression in the game. And I haven't even seen the entire map myself. And for me, holding off on seeing the entire map or pacing how I see the entire map plays a big role in maintaining interest in the game, as well as not ever feeling like I've experienced everything. It's also important in a game like Palworld to mark points of interest so that you can come back to them when you have the ability to complete them, right? There are lots of dungeons, and specifically the towers stand out so drastically that they literally give you a quest in itself, right? Those don't necessarily have to be written in text as quests. They kind of become quests on their own just by their existence and your discovery of them. So for me, I always have something to do when it comes to map exploration, or if I'm feeling like running around the map or seeing new things. Granted, yes, a lot of the content in the game has a bit of repetition to it, or could be considered repetitive, but I don't look at it from the standpoint of, oh, this is all going to be the same. I look at it from the standpoint of what if, or where is this going? Right, the game is still in early access and I'm curious about what the future holds, and even specifically what's the difference between this dungeon and that dungeon, right? Although they may look the same on the surface or at the entrance per se, there are still aspects about it that are unique and worth experiencing at least one time. Next, I want to talk about capturing mini pals and just learning about different PAL systems. I feel like even at this point in the game, at level 43, although I've discovered most of the PALs, I think I have maybe one officially left to discover and then a bunch of reskins or 0.5 versions of PALs. But I don't feel as though I know all the PALs, right? I feel like a lot of effort has been put into making the PALs unique, and I think spending a lot of time capturing them, not only because of their uniqueness, but clearly they give EXP and is an essential part in progression in the game, is going to be important. Because let's say you're tired of just walking around aimlessly or just exploring the map, or you're tired of working on a base or the technology chart, and you're really trying to literally focus on leveling up. That option does exist. You can just run around the game, capture every PAL 10 times from the standpoint of being a completionist or from the standpoint of getting EXP. Even in my own experience at level 43 on hard settings, because the EXP rate is reduced, it literally feels like I have to catch every PAL in the game 10 times. And as daunting or as annoying as a challenge as that may sound, it feels good from the standpoint of looking at the game as an MMORPG, just because when I play an MMORPG, I want to feel like I've completed the game. I want to feel like I'm an end gamer, right? I want that sense of status. I want that sense of fulfillment. And capturing mini pals definitely does that for me. And this shouldn't be a surprise, but at some point you're clearly going to have to make a team. And the best way to know what team you even want to make would be to capture mini pals and learn from them. The next focal point of progression shouldn't come as a surprise, but you should beat the first tower. When I was playing the game in the earlier days, the quest to go beat the Syndicate Tower stood out as the final piece of what may be considered Palworld's tutorial. And I think that's actually really essential because it begins or it completes the loop, I would say. I know many people say that right now Palworld doesn't have an in-game loop or whatnot, but if you ask me, that is the loop, right? You explore the map, you capture many pals and level up, and then you beat the tower. And that loop evolves as you get further and further into the game. And granted, if you're playing on casual or normal, I'm under the impression that the loop progresses much faster or easier. But in my experience on hard settings at least, it feels like that loop widens or it broadens between each tower. The first one was fairly easy, but I couldn't complete it until I was around level 20. And then the second tower gave me some challenges, but I completed it somewhere in the mid 30s. And as I've gotten to the last 3 towers, the loop has shown me that there's a bunch of work that I had to get done. There's a lot more to do rather than just running straight through the game and thinking I can steamroll through the bosses. Now the bosses are starting to have a better sense of world placement. I feel like the first boss, and I'm not too well versed on the second, but the first 2 bosses are more so minor characters in the overarching story of what Palworld is trying to present. The first tower is the daughter of an officer who just took over the area. But as you progress through the towers, you start to get these more prominent and dominant characters who seem to play bigger roles on the island. They're not just any pushover or a young child who's rebellious to the system. They hold stake in the island, and they are not easy, and they shouldn't be viewed as easy. And for me, as a player who has landed on this island in this world, who am I to think I can just take any team of pals or take a lackadaisical approach to beating these bosses without preparation? And that preparation is the loop. That preparation is the meat of what the game is. And I'm under the impression that once I am thoroughly prepared for each encounter, it will feel as though I have overcome a large milestone, or I've overcome a major progression wall akin to what you would experience in an MMORPG. So beat the first tower. And really, this part of the flowchart should be titled Focus on the Towers, because everything beyond this point, I feel as though, is an outcome of the existence of the towers. And without the towers, I would not have developed the mentality or the sense of purpose to work towards every aspect following on the flowchart. So next would be build different bases. This one is really interesting to me because although I've played games like Minecraft and other survival games, I've never really been a big base builder. I've never really been a major builder in general. You know, I'd always be the type to create a small house or a small outpost and just use it as a means to an end, opposed to actually giving it some focus and some intentionality as to propel myself through the game and the game systems. I know there are many survival games where the base plays a much larger role in the experience, but it's really just not something I'm used to. And I think it's extremely essential to avoid burnout in Palworld. One, because it's almost like a disconnect from the rest of the game. When you're building a base, it's such a serene and peaceful experience and such an escape from even the world itself. It's almost like you're playing a completely different game. Granted, there are base raids, but they can be avoided in a variety of ways, or at least you can place yourself in spaces to avoid those. And I wouldn't necessarily consider that to be a glitch or a bug or an exploit per se, because realistically speaking, my base is placed up high in mountains and there's just no way to travel up there. I'm not expecting the enemies to get to me, and I see that as a strategical decision. Also, when I say build different bases, I really do mean build multiple and different bases, right? I have my main base where the vast majority of the general production takes place, and it's where I hold the majority of my items, and it's mostly peaceful and serene, and I'm able to focus on minor goals with ease. And then I have other bases that aren't completely fleshed out, that are more focused on mining coal. There are many ways to approach bases. You could have a sulfur-based base, or you can have that one mineral that is found in the ice region. But regardless, build different bases and spend time being intentional about bases. As simple as a statement as build different bases is, I really feel like this point on the chart needs its own video, because just like the MMORPG perspective and the MMORPG approach, the base building in this game is so in-depth, and I'm not talking about just placing down structures. I'm talking about the AI. The PAL AI base building functionality in this game is so in-depth, you really could play this game just for the base building. I mean, looking at the next point of breeding, duping, capturing, upgrading, condensing, and enhancing, I'm mostly referring to making the team. But this point could be easily applied to a base, and that could give you hundreds of hours of gameplay just building or just nurturing. That's the key word. Nurturing pals that are masters of what they do, whether that is pals that have an incredibly high work speed, pals that can mine extremely fast, pals that stay up overnight and have around the clock functionality, right? I think when you look at the trailer of the game, it kind of sells the idea of the pals being a slave, or the pal servant concept really hard. And when I look at Palworld as an MMORPG, I even see myself as a full-time life skiller in that aspect, because I've played Black Desert Online, and I know maybe RuneScape and some other games have life skills that are a heavy aspect of the game, but you really could be a full-time life skiller and get that satisfaction. And whether you aren't full-time with life skilling, you could still spend some time doing it as like a side means of enjoyment of the game. Because like I said before, it gets really annoying to have to fix your gear because the durability has dropped over and over again. It gets annoying to feel like your resources are limited. So why not give a bunch of your time and energy to just building out your bases and making them the best bases possible? But once again, this topic could easily be its own video. Next point is where I've really started to understand the loop for my enjoyment's sake, and I've really started to understand that this game has a lot to offer in a unique way when it comes to the pals. I mean, it should be obvious. The game is called Palworld, right? But I think because of how easy it is to be distracted by the island, the resources, the survival aspects, it is so easy to forget that the pals, your literal pals you have, are capable of their own progression. They level up with you. They have skills. They have unique talents, and they have so much potential. That is really the word. Pals have so much potential from the moment you capture them to what they could eventually be. And every pal has almost unlimited potential based off of your interests. This is probably the main MMORPG aspect of the game, if any. You could really build pals out to be exactly what you want them to be or how you want them to be. Granted, I feel like right now with early access, I don't know if it's just because I'm in a hard server or what, but it feels a bit slow. But when I look at the game from the standpoint of an MMORPG, things really aren't always fast, right? That's where the sense of reward comes, right? That's where the sense of identity comes. That's where the sense of personal success comes. When I have a level 50 dire howl with 3 movement speed passives and 1 damage passive, and someone else has a dire howl that is considerably slower and it's level 2 and mine is level 5 when it comes to condensing the pals, it's just night and day on an MMORPG outlook. I'm the guy in the town with the nice gear, but the gear in this instance isn't necessarily gear, but it's my pals, right? My pals are my trophy. My pals are my class or my job selection, like an MMORPG. The pals are a reflection of your progression, and in breeding them, in capturing many duplicates of them, upgrading them, condensing them, and enhancing them, you will easily get hundreds of hours of experience that I feel will make the gameplay feel more worthwhile, as well as continue to push you to play because of the curiosity of just, what if I played this pal in that way, right? And right now we're in early access, right? We're basically playing an alpha test of the real Palworld. The real Palworld doesn't exist. So we're playing around with these concepts in their most raw forms from our perspective. In the future, who's to say that this element of the gameplay is the most essential when it comes to PvP, when it comes to factions, when it comes to raids, when it comes to literally just being able to beat the final bosses or the future content in the game. Players that have not spent time breeding, have not spent time condensing, have not spent time enhancing or upgrading their pals may be in a position where they are outclassed. Like when you play an MMORPG and you haven't correctly built out your class, you haven't correctly prepared for the content. This pillar may be the determining factor in whether or not you can effectively navigate the game. From one standpoint, it could be seen as a meta development, but for me at this point, it's just about developing the best pals as its own sense of gameplay progression and enjoyment. Recognizing that each individual pal requires time and energy for it to reach its potential is a sacrificial element to gameplay, similar to an MMORPG. Because I have to focus so much time on these specific pals, I have to be critical about my decision makings of what pals or what team I'm trying to build out, and that really gets me to the next and final aspect of this progression focused flowchart pyramid, which is to make a team. Right now, at the top of my gameplay goals is to create a team that I'm not only proud of, but reflects who I am in the game and also reflects my efforts in a way that does require a time commitment. And I do find a sense of pleasure in developing this team because it's unique to me and my interest. At my current point in the game, I haven't looked at any guides or dug deep into any databases or resources to assist me with my selection. I've simply chosen the elemental approach I want to go for, which is a neutral team. And I've just thought about if this was an MMORPG and I was building out my team comp similar to competitive MOBA games, I think about that main DPS, that secondary DPS. What are my mobility pals? What utility pals do I need or buffers would I use in order to make my team better? And even looking at this chart specifically, my dire howl could be my main DPS, also my main mobility. And I'm only selecting that based off of my early exposure to it when I started playing the game. Or I can sub it out for the Fanglobe, which has more vertical mobility and a different sense of identity, while also serving as a primary DPS or secondary DPS. And then looking at Lunaris or Lavender as a primary DPS or even secondary DPS and just thinking about their overall utility. Lunaris increases my carrying capacity, and when fully upgraded, I'm sure she'll feel like a must-have pal in my team. Or maybe swapping her out for Lavender, or even partnering her with Lavender as a main DPS who has the ability to maintain HP or sustain in combat. And then looking at Toko Toko as a potential secondary DPS or main utility pal, considering I can actually use its partner skill as a weapon itself. And from that perspective, I don't have to use the other weapons in the game. I can take an approach to make Toko Toko as strong as possible so that the egg bomb skill is a reliable source of damage. Or I can swap out Toko Toko with Premise to use the neutral pal passive buff to attack damage. And also using Gale Claw as a primary mobility or potential combination with Fanglobe when double jumping and swapping to speed gliding, and the Gale Claw increases my mobility potential, right? There's 1,000 ways to look at making a team, but right now this is the team I'm making, or the approach I'm taking to making my team. And I think in general, when it comes to progression and focusing on progression in Palworld, you have to create a long-term goal for having a team. And that long-term goal will guide you or be your why, or your constant reminder of what it is you're playing the game for, or what it is you hope to get out of the game long-term. And every pillar below it feeds back into that goal. And I think for myself, only then will I feel a sense of completion, or will I feel as though I can move on from the game or move on to the next server, when I've created my ideal team. And I've created my ideal build, essentially, which is akin to MMORPGs. And then I'll have that sense of overall completion, right? To me, this is the easiest way to maintain focus and continue to play Palworld without feeling any sense of burnout, because I know where I'm going. I know what it is that I want long term, and I won't feel that sense of accomplishment until I've reached it, until I've had this ideal team of all level 50 pals that meet my needs and my interests. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully this helps you with building your own teams, and hopefully this helps you with having your own sense of purpose or enjoyment when playing Palworld, when you get close to that concept of burnout, or you're distracted from what it is you're actually playing the game for. It's your boy Lamar's. Thanks for watching. Best of luck to you. I'm out.